balanced view on politics in today's world. Based on facts, born of rationality, common sense, and logic, providing context on today's events. This is American Perspective with Rick Thomas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to American Perspective. I am your host, Rick. I've got a few things going on here. Nothing really of, ecstatic or spectacular news here. I mean, let's be honest, some of the best news came out earlier this week. So, now I'm being told, or Tommy is over on Facebook is saying that there's another active shooter situation outside of London, Kentucky. I did not hear that. No, there better not be any extreme close-up. What? Extreme close-up? No extreme close-ups. Not anymore. See? Take a look. I shut off the Zoom. So there we go. Oh, apparently it's still going on out there. Well, we'll have to get to that in just a little bit. But anyway. All right. Let's go ahead and kick things off with our favorite AI, who is going to be doing the Pledge of Allegiance for tonight. Let's go ahead and stand, remove our hats, place our hand over our hearts, and follow along with AI Trump in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag, that wonderful flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And, of course, that was submitted by the wonderful 3 Chevy over on Rumble for that. And, of course, I thank him for that. Also, too, if you would like to get your Pledge of Allegiance in your version done here on the program, all you need to do is record yourself doing it, and then, of course, send it on to me. Send it to me at the email address fans, F-A-N-S, at americanperspective.online. That's fans at americanperspective.online. And you can get it to me, and I'll go ahead and take care of the rest. All right. So, thank you, AI Trump. AI Trump. I like that. All right. Let's go ahead and get on with tonight's sponsor. And, of course, because it is... Oh, wait. Before I go to the sponsor, tonight I am drinking the Walcott. Again, like I said, I'm trying to get rid of the bottle so I can make room on the shelf for something else. So there it is. That's the Walcott, and I am drinking it out of the We the People, and you just can't quite see it, but We the People Lucky Shot USA. It's got that bullet penetrating into the glass, which is pretty cool. And there you go. So got the stones in the bottom. As 3 Chevy constantly says, it takes stones to drink with me. All right. Anyway. Sorry, Mark. No, I can't drink scotch. Just cannot do it. The only scotch that I've been able to drink is Chivas Regal Blue. That's the only one. I can't do it. I can't drink scotch. It's bourbon or Irish. That seems to be my two hanging places. So anyway, all right, let's go ahead and get on with tonight's promo. Of course, being the Institute on the Constitution. The Institute on the Constitution was established in 2004 as a 501c3 nonprofit with one singular mission, and that is to restore the constitutional republic through grassroots education. All courses and materials are developed using primary source documents and taught from the American view of law and government, as defined in the Declaration of Independence in the following 3 key points. 1, there is a God. 2, our rights come from him. And 3, The purpose of civil government is to secure and protect our God-given rights. The IOTC offers the opportunity to educate yourself on our most precious founding document, the Constitution of the United States. They also provide tools to educate your community and get involved with local government. Start by taking their free. Oh, there we go. Start by taking their free U.S. Constitution course and go from there. Use my affiliate link, iotc.americanperspective.online, to sign up. And while you are there, take a moment to look through their other course material and information. My affiliate link, once again, is iotc.americanperspective.online to get great content to learn about our historical founding and support the show in the process. That's iotc.americanperspective.online, or if you just want to purchase this fabulous Saddleback leather-bound U.S. Constitution, go to constitution.americanperspective.online. Take a look at this thing. It's got 1/8 of an inch of Saddleback leather. The pages inside are tear and water resistant. They didn't cheap on the binding. The binding is not cheap glue. It is stitched all the way through the leather, wrapping the pages inside nice and tight. It has a 100-year warranty against materials and workmanship defects. If something goes wrong in that time period, you can send it back to the manufacturer and they will either fix it or replace it for free. There is no rear end poking or chest poking because it has sexy rounded corners. And my youngest whiskey warrior has stated that this, oh, wait a minute. I screwed that up. Let me go back. It is Buddy tested, Buddy approved, Billy tasted, Billy approved, and my youngest whiskey warrior has confirmed that the information inside will get you your Scout's badge in civics. So head on off to constitution.americanperspective.online and get yours today. I highly recommend getting them and using them as stocking stuffers for Christmas. That is a fantastic gift. You can watch your conservative friends say, oh, this is so nice and awesome. And you can watch your liberal friends explode their heads. Go to constitution.americanperspective.online to get yours today. And don't forget to check out the rest of the Institute on the Constitution's materials and other information that they have. Great company, doing some great things to help educate in a gap where people are no longer being educated appropriately for this. So go and check them out. Institute on the Constitution. And of course, I thank them for allowing me to be an affiliate. All right. So quick update apparently on that shooting. I'm starting to see some of my Whiskey Warrior P1s are surfing the web at the same time listening to me, and it sounds like there was a few details, but it's still being called an active shooter situation. The shooter was shooting from either an overpass or a wooded area nearby and shooting at cars. What is this world going to come to? Now, of course, they're going to jump on that. Any of the liberals are going to jump on that and say it's a gun problem. No, it's not. But let's go ahead. I've got something a little bit about that too, here in just a little bit, but let's go ahead and shift some quick gears and get to, the first thing, which is of course the normal thing. I guess it's normal now. So Russia is back on the docket for this election cycle. Well, let's be honest, it never really leaves because everybody pretty much knows that Russia does actually attempt to interfere in our elections. Okay, they just do. So does China. So does China, because China has been seen and accused of hacking into or attempting to hack into our elections machines. That's all happened. And plus, if you recall that article not too long ago that I was talking about, how the New Hampshire machines were actually calling out to Ukraine, and the Ukrainian national anthem was embedded in the database. Oh. Anyway, so there you are. So we have Russia, Russia, Russia. However, there's a twist on this version. And by the way, this is coming from the Federalist, although this has been a story out there for quite some time. But there is a twist on this version. And the twist is essentially that it's going after right-wing podcasters. And by right-wing, I mean conservatives. But the thing about it is that yes, there's no basis. There isn't any basis or known basis for these allegations, especially against some of the podcasters that are out there. So, yeah. So the Biden administration announced this week, here, let me get this closer for you. The Biden administration announced this week that it was taking action against Kremlin-run websites and Russian state media employees as part of an effort to crack down on Russian misinformation ahead of the election. Yeah, well, this is the problem, is that it's not Russian disinformation that they're going after. So what they're doing is the timing of the indictment and the accompanying announcement is happening, of course, 2 weeks before in-person voting begins in some of the states. So let's just be real. Okay, they're trying to do this to mess things up. But here's the thing. They are accusing, or let me put it this way, the allegations that are there has to be based upon the idea that these podcasters are Russian plants, paid proponents for Trump, and that all of this has been coordinated by a conservative media outlet called Tenny, I think, T-E-N-E-Y. And the thing about it is that there's nothing that really is there within the indictment that kind of demonstrates the evidence of this. And especially when you look at the people who were targeted as a part of this, the individuals that were targeted, and I'm trying to find all of their names just to be on the safe side. Okay, so the operation involves 2 Russian nationals who worked for RT, which is a media outlet, formerly known as Russian Today, which is a state-run media outlet. And these 2 employees allegedly ran a series of covert projects that included funneling $10 million to the Tennessee-based company called Tenet Media, T-E-N-E-T Media, which was founded in 2022 by Liam Donovan and his wife, Lauren Chen. Now, Lauren Chen is connected to Blaze Media, is also connected to Turning Point USA, and she made videos for the Blaze, which has since cut ties from her, by the way, and offered what were meant to be edgy conservative takes on social media. Now, the scheme, allegedly, was that they used this connection in order to fund other right-wing type commentators, such as Dave Rubin, Tim Pool, and Benny Johnson, without disclosing that their company was funded and directed by RT. Now, all 3 of those individuals have released statements as of Wednesday, insisting that they were deceived by Tenet and are victims rather than perpetrators within this kind of plot. Okay. Now, the thing about it is that the scheme itself doesn't appear to be all that successful. And in fact, according to what's in the indictment, and this is the part that's the reality of the situation, according to the indictment, the RT employees that were running the project grew frustrated that the social media influencers that they had paid through Tenant weren't actually sharing Tenant's videos or promoting the company enough. So, yeah. So the thing is, and this is according to Benny Johnson, by the way, in particular, he said that his contract, the contract that his lawyers negotiated last year was a standard arm's length deal, which was later terminated. Now, Tim Pool has also gone on to, he went on to the Daily Wire and was talking to Ben Shapiro about this. And he literally basically said, he's like, look, I own everything. I own my entire likeness. I own all of my media outlets. I own everything in terms of the idea that anything was put out there that was not mine, that was influenced by somebody else, is essentially what he's saying, is false. And, you know, again, keep in mind, this is the same thing that people like Dan Bongino are the same way. If I were ever approached to do something from a sponsorship aspect or to get paid, which, first of all, I would be welcome to the conversation, but the thing about it is that I'm going to own everything. I own my own media company that produces this broadcast. I own every piece and shred of intellectual property that is mine here, my commentary, so on and so forth. And so, you know, everything that you see here is something that I would tell you generally in public on the street. There's nothing fake, nothing that anybody has been able to tell me. And I promise, I can tell you right now, I will keep it that way. There's no way that anybody is going to try and force me into saying something that I definitely am not believing in. And that's essentially what happened here with these guys. Now, they may have gotten some sort of a contract through Tenant Media about this. But again, you know, these conservative commentators, of course, are all essentially the same thought process as most conservative commentators are, in being a little bit, shall we say, skeptical of things. And so therefore, we're pretty much more than likely not going to put anything out that would necessarily be pushing for any one given particular foreign entity, for an example. And I will admit that it is easy sometimes to hide stuff. I mean, if you're talking to a company and that company doesn't disclose to you where their money comes from, I could see it. I could see that being a bit of a problem and a challenge at any given time. But the fact that this is even a case, and the fact that they're even attempting, and now keep in mind, this is the press and the social media leftist acolyte lunatics that are pushing the idea that these three are actually, agents for Russia at this point. And so, you know, again, this is one of those points where you just have to kind of break it down and understand a little bit about what's going on here. Now, again, you know, foreign entities attempting to infiltrate our elections and sow division is nothing unusual. This has happened since the beginning, probably, of any opportunity from a foreign entity to be able to get involved in our elections. And so, a lot of nations are doing it. Like I just pointed out, there's both Russia and China. Iran supposedly has been trying to get into our elections and those kinds of things and shape public perception. But nobody has been shaping public perception more than the Democrats, especially here recently. And by recently, I mean within the last 3 or 4 election cycles, because they're trying to make you think that the Republicans are looking to destroy democracy, and we're not. Well, I mean, I don't necessarily count myself as a Republican, but conservatives are just trying to save the republic, not democracy. Now, what's even worse, though, is the fact that the Justice Department and the FBI and other federal intelligence agencies are actually falling in to these scams, meaning that they are not seeing them for what they are, and they're being utilized in order to try and go after these foreign entities and stuff like that, instead of going after the conservative American patriot broadcasters who are doing this. So, again, the left gloms onto it, doesn't read the details, doesn't read the fine print, and of course continues with the whole idea that, anyone who is conservative is actually trying to do Russia's bidding. Now, I showed you not too long ago that Russia is interested in Kamala Harris being in charge because of the fact that Kamala Harris is, of course, very, very, shall we say, ideologically aligned with the Russians in terms of her Marxism. Okay. Now, you know what? I just realized that, honestly, that I missed. Oh my gosh, I can't even believe I haven't been yelled at for this. But I missed the top of the hour segment, which is, of course, for Saturday night, which is, of course, on this day in American history. So here we are. I'm going to circle back and catch up on this. All right, and of course, on this day in American history, we read from the American Patriots Almanac, written by William J. Bennett and John T.E. Cribb. Chock full, look at how thick that is. Chock full with all kinds of little factoids and information. Oh, I guess I missed that in the chat. Oh my goodness, Music Man calling me out, saying that it was mentioned. I obviously missed it. Wasn't paying attention to it. I apologize. My goodness. All right, so tonight's On This Day in American History, we are going to talk about Philo Farnsworth, who is the forgotten inventor. On September 7th, 1927, in a San Francisco laboratory, inventor Philo Farnsworth and a small team of assistants placed a slide containing an image of a triangle in front of a machine Farnsworth called an image dissector. And then gathered around a receiving tube on the other side of a partition. As they watched, one line of the triangle appeared in a small bluish square of light on the receiver. At Farnsworth's instructions, someone rotated the slide. As if by magic, the image of the line on the receiver turned as well. Oh my gosh, what is this? What kind of magic is this? That's it, folks, Farnsworth exclaimed. We've done it. There you have electronic television. As Farnsworth refined his device, he surely thought that fame and fortune awaited him. It wasn't to be. Russian immigrant Vladimir Zworykin, who had also been trying to develop a television system, claimed that he was the true inventor of TV. Zworykin worked for Radio Corporation of America, also known as RCA, which began to sell television sets and broadcast programs. Years of legal battles followed, and although the U.S. Patent Office sided with Farnsworth, he lost other lawsuits, and years passed before RCA actually paid him for his work. Farnsworth never received much public recognition for his world-changing invention. Ironically, he appeared on national television only once. In 1957, he was a mystery guest on the TV game show called I've Got a Secret. A panel of celebrities peppered him with questions about his secret, but failed to guess what it was, which was, I invented electronic television. His prize for stumping the panel was $80 and a carton of cigarettes. Nearly 2 decades after Farnsworth's death, his home state of Utah placed a statue of him in the Statuary Hall in the U.S. Capitol. On the statue's base are inscribed the words, Father of Television. That is tonight's On This Day in American History. Now, what's interesting about that is RCA actually went and sold out, and this RCA was the key company to start farming out all of our electronics manufacturing over to the Japanese at first. They farmed it out, and everybody else kind of followed in order to make the television less expensive for American people. And that is what started the whole idea of manufacturing electronics over in the Far East. So blame RCA. And the patents for television and stuff like that, actually, and this is something that the Japanese have done quite well, actually, is that when you apply for a patent over there, it takes 7 years, or at least it was at the last information that I had, was it takes 7 years for the patent to get approved. And generally what happens is that patent is then handed over to Japanese companies in order to get reverse engineered. And if you're lucky, you'll actually get the patent in 7 years. Because what'll happen is the company will reverse engineer it and then apply for a patent as well. And you'll end up with a problem putting a patent or filing a patent over in Japan. Anyway. All right. So let's move on to my next subject, which is in relation to what I just told you with regards to this whole idea that the mainstream media is, the mainstream media is the enemy of the people. And Donald Trump actually is, I'm going to credit him, during his first term in office, he actually demonstrated how much the mainstream media is a bit of a problem for us when it comes to propagandism and being able to manipulate the mindset of the American people through those, in particular, through those outlets. And we're still seeing it today. But the advantage, and this is part of the reason why they had to shut Donald Trump down off of Twitter as quickly as possible when things started to go bad, was because of the fact that Twitter and other alternate means of media dispersion were bringing on a bit of a problem for the mainstream media companies. They could no longer control the propaganda that was coming out from them. They were no longer able to control the brain of the American public. And this is exactly why outlets such as Rumble and now owned by Elon Musk X are so important to the concept of free speech. Well, here's an example of where things, and this happens, by the way, all the time. with Trump in particular, but also with other conservative folks. And this is a perfect example of exactly why we need alternative sources to gain media and gain different perspectives from other places that are not the mainstream media. But before I get into that, let me tell you about this wonderful shirt that I'm wearing. It is a logoed gear shirt. Take a look. That is American Perspective logo gear right there. Let me tell you, you can get yours by heading off to my store. You can go to store.americanperspective.online and you can find all of my logoed gear there. I have t-shirts, crew neck sweatshirts, hoodies, tank tops, not to mention water bottles. I think I've got a version of a water bottle and a couple of coffee mugs. There's also a link there where you can go and get the Constitution of the United States as well. And if you follow that link or follow where I told you, constitution.americanperspective.online, I'll get credit. But all of these things, of course, are for you to peruse and enjoy. In fact, my news just got her Racerback American Perspective logoed tank top here just recently, and she sent me a photo. Let me tell you, it looks great. I mean, she makes it look great, okay, but it still looks great. So go to store.americanperspective.online and get your logoed gear, your American Perspective logoed gear today. All right. So let's continue on. The news is, and believe me, I don't think anybody really understands how much of a lock the mainstream media had for such a long time with this. But here's an example. Okay. Just this week, we had a horrific event happen in Georgia. And that Georgia school shooting, of course, has spawned the concept and the conversation, of course, back again about gun control. And one of the things that has occurred, of course, is the political pundits that we have need to make statements on this because, of course, the American people are attempting to find out where they sit or stand, depending on the matter. One of them, of course, was J.D. Vance. Now, J.D. Vance was misquoted by the Associated Press. And this is part of the trick that the mainstream media does, is they take a small segment of what somebody says and they use that rather than expanding it and giving you the entire context of the surrounding conversation, the surrounding subject matter, the surrounding words. So the Associated Press posted on X, by the way, and they also used this same thing. They posted it elsewhere on their socials, and it basically says this title: J.D. Vance says school shootings are a fact of life, and then calls for better security. Now, somebody would look at that just like when Donald Trump has said that, by the way. They also have done this multiple times for many other folks, many other people too. It's not just these two, but these two seem to be a target of a, kind of selective editing, let's say. And what happened here was that J.D. Vance, he addressed it, and the Associated Press, of course, truncated it. And so you would look at that and say, well, J.D. Vance says school shootings are a fact of life. God, what a horrible take. If you're not a smart individual, if you're considered a moron of the leftist caliber, you're going to look at that and think, oh my gosh, J.D. Vance, oh hell, he said that. Well, the reality of it is, and believe me, everybody who is a moron jumped on this. I mean, we're talking Kamala Harris's campaign jumped on this. Tim Walz jumped on this. They all did. They all jumped on this fake news headline. And yes, I am calling it fake news because that's exactly what it is fake news. So Kamala Harris's account, and let's be honest, both of these, they have interns. But Kamala Harris's account responded back and said, school shootings are not just a fact of life. It doesn't have to be this way. We can take action to protect our children, and we will, of course. Tim Walz, of course, said, this is pathetic. We can't quit on our kids. They deserve better. And the Harris and Walz campaign actually together even went and released a full-on statement about the headline. Gavin Newsom accused J.D. Vance of shrugging his shoulders. The Huffington Post reported it. Self-described, journalists, Aaron Rupar, responded with a picture of J.D. Vance behind bulletproof glass with the caption, a picture of a guy who says shootings are a fact of life. I mean, these guys, yeah. Well, here's the reality, folks. It's all bullshit. It is 100% complete bullshit. Here is the entire quote, as said by the man himself, J.D. Vance.
I don't like this. I don't like to admit this. I don't like that this is a fact of life. But if you are a psycho and you want to make headlines, you realize that our schools are soft targets. And we have got to bolster security at our schools so that a person who walks through the front door we've got to bolster security so that if a psycho wants to walk through the front door and kill a bunch of children, they're not able to.
So that's what he said. That's what he actually said. But they went ahead and manipulated and selectively edited what he said, which is, again, this is part of the reason why you cannot trust the mainstream media in any way, shape, or form over this, when it, especially when it comes to things like Russia, interference in elections, Donald Trump, or J.D. Vance, or literally any other conservative person, individual, so on and so forth. This is part of the reason why it is always a good idea to verify, validate, and ensure that what you are being told is the actual truth. Okay? And the fact of the matter is that, yes, we do have a bit of a challenge when it comes to school shootings. And unfortunately, they are starting to become a little routine. But the problem here, folks, is not the guns, unlike what the left wants you to believe. And J.D. Vance hit on one of them, is that we have allowed our schools to become soft targets. They are soft targets. And so what ends up happening is somebody who has a psychotic propensity to go and do something of this nature, they're not going to go to a military installation where it is likely that they might run across somebody who may have a weapon and is much better trained than they are to take them out. But the option of a soft target where the less likelihood of them getting killed for at least the few minutes that it takes for the police to actually respond, okay, it allows them to carry out their psychotic behavior for longer with less risk, and for them to be able to perpetuate the carnage and the damage and get their name even further vaulted into the media and the media frame set because of this. And so this is why I continually advocate that, yes, we need to harden our schools. We need to have people, unfortunately, we need to have people with weapons on the facility to be able to mitigate things like this. I guarantee you that if you, and like I was telling you earlier when this first came out, if you go and make the target less likely to be a soft target and to be a more of a hardened target, that individual is going to go on and move on. They're not going to want to engage with somebody because they might not get what they are looking for. They might end up in a situation where they are getting totally destroyed with it. And this is part of the reason why, unfortunately, that power of deterrency or deterrence that I have talked about in the past is so important. Now, where does this kind of lead? Well, let me explain where this led. I'm sorry, I got distracted for a second. Buddy Weiser provided the background, and he was making a comment about the background. He said the background looks good. It's hard to tell until you see it with someone sitting in front of it. So there it is. Yes, thank you, buddy, for turning in the backgrounds. All right. So where am I going with this? Well, one of the things that the liberals, and I hate saying liberals, but that's what they're leftists. I mean, there's no longer a liberal anymore. There's leftists. And one thing that these leftists do, and this article comes from Woke Spy, and it proves essentially, along with a couple other things that have happened in the past, a couple of places, like a couple cities in Georgia that have passed, everybody having everybody having a gun in the house and so on and so forth. And there's all kinds of studies that demonstrate this, by the way. But the leftists seem to ignore the fact that there is a state that, believe it or not, is progressive and is Democrat leaning, and has what a lot of left-leaning organizations have given them very low ratings, okay, but have proven to be the opposite of the rule. Let me show you what I mean. So here in Woke Spy, liberals say that this state has the craziest gun laws, yet it's also the safest state. So, according to several outlets, such as the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence, they claim that Vermont's gun laws are the worst in the nation. They lead to the illegal trade of firearms. They put children at risk. The Giffords Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence gives Vermont an F on its gun control scorecard. Vermont gets a few honorable mentions in the Washington Post on the 6 craziest state gun laws, which reports that you can conceal and carry a firearm at age 16 in the state without a license. State has no minimum age to own a rifle or a shotgun. The Trace, which is a website started with funding by Every Town for Gun Safety. You know, that group that got together here after, I think it was the Marjorie Stoneman Bridge High School shooting. But they chided Vermont as being a gun rights paradise, quoting one gun rights activist as saying that Vermont for over 220 years has never had permits, has never had registration, and has never had any serious gun laws. Well, you would think that Vermont, with all of those guns and all of those lax laws, would have potentially some of the highest gun crime and gun violence epidemic just all over the state. Except there's only one problem. Vermont is also the safest state in the nation in 2016, 2017, 2018, rated as second safest in 2019 and 2020, and then once again regained the safest state in 2021, 2022, and 2023. That's 11 years in being in the top two. That's 11 years straight being in the top two, considered the safest state in the nation. And yet they have the laxest gun laws. I wonder why. Well, gun violence in particular is almost non-existent in the state. According to the Vermont Department of Health, they've only seen 7 gun homicides a year every year from 2011 to 2014. In 2015, the state had 12, but then it fell back to 7 in 2016. So in a state that it has a population of 620,000 people, that's a rate of 1.12 firearm homicides per 100,000 people in a typical year. The FBI statistics reported only 2 in Vermont in 2012, which created a firearm homicide rate of 0.3 per 100,000. For comparison, St. Louis, which is one of the cities that has a very high gun control and gun law rating, has a gun homicide rate of 66.7 per 100,000. Roughly 6 times, almost 7 times more than that in Vermont. The stats for other cities include Birmingham, which is 61.3, Portsmouth, 49.3, 44 for Detroit, 42 for Memphis, 37.7 for Milwaukee, and of course, the list goes on and on and on. And every single one of those high-end places, high-end cities, all have some of the strongest gun control laws in this nation. Now, they're trying to point out, a lot of liberals or leftists, I say, are trying to counter that reality by pointing out that Vermont's gun homicide has risen by late by a massive percent. But it's a massive percent of a microscopic number, which again, this is where you end up with these people trying to manipulate these statistics. So overall, the country itself, meaning the U.S., had a 6% decrease in national firearm homicides from 2021 to 2022. Now, Vermont saw a 185% jump, according to Vermont State Police Captain Sean Lone, which basically is that they went from 7 to 20. Yeah. Still have fewer gun homicides per capita in the entire country. They never, liberals, leftists, these Democrat morons never seem to talk about the fact that guns in perpetual existence can also be a complete deterrent. What a mess. What a mess. All right. So, let me take a second. Get a splash out of my glass. Congress comes back next week. Yes, that's right. They come back from their month-long summer break and they start things back up again. And of course, we want to pay attention to what happens in Congress because, let's be honest, what happens in Congress goes and affects all of us. So here, from the Epic Times, we have the 5 things to watch in Congress in September. And of course, the number one thing that we're attempting to pay attention to, okay, is essentially the House GOP's suggestion and recommendation that they enter in what is called a continuing resolution, or what we call a stopgap bill, to avert the government shutdown. And what they're doing is they're wrapping it with the SAVE Act. Johnson wants to get both done, and he's tying both of them together. Now, let's be honest. We really don't think this is going to happen. As much as Johnson wants to act like he's like this big guy with big cojones, big brass balls. I honestly don't think, I think he's going to end up screwing us in the end. He's not going to get the SAVE Act. It's going to get kicked out, and he's going to be under pressure to, of course, fund the government for a big period of time. But let's take a quick look in what this stopgap bill is potentially going to have in it. The first thing, of course, is that the stopgap bill is presented to where not only does it prevent the government shutdown for a short period of time, it's actually got a long period of time added on here. And it's giving essentially Congress the ability to wait until after the election to really start talking about the funding of the government. And there's a bit of a political reason for this to happen, because if you think about it, if we get a Republican Congress in and a Republican Senate, if we happen to get both, along with a Republican president, well, then all of a sudden, all these funding bills, you'll start seeing all sorts of things that can go on with regards to government funding. Now, they are pushing for it to go all the way to, I think it's in March is where they're pushing for it to go to. And the Senate, the majority leader, Chuck Schumer, and of course the Senate Appropriations Committee chairwoman, my stupid individual here from Washington, Patty Murray, they issued a joint statement saying that avoiding the government shutdown requires bipartisanship and not a bill drawn up by one party, which of course, as of right now, it's the House GOP that has drawn it up. And Mike Johnson said in a statement, quote, "Today, House Republicans are taking a critically important step to keep the federal government funded and to secure our federal election process." And this was after the draft text was revealed. He said, "Congress has a responsibility to do both, and we must ensure that only American citizens can decide American elections." Now, both Schumer and Patty Murray said that Johnson was wasting precious time with the measure and is making the same mistake as former Speaker McCarthy did a year ago. They said that this tactic didn't work last September, and it will not work for this year either. If Speaker Johnson drives House Republicans down this highly partisan path, the odds of a shutdown go way up. Well, here's what I'm saying. Here's what I say. Oh, and by the way, it would fund the government. This stopgap measure would fund the government until March 28th of 2025. Which is well beyond the election. So here's the thing. I say shut the government down. Go ahead. Get the Democrats on record for why they want to stop this, which essentially is, let's be honest, the whole SAVE Act passage. Get them on record for saying that they are voting it down because of the SAVE Act. Make the Senate carve that SAVE Act out so that the American people can see that the Democrats have literally zero interest in making the SAVE Act a priority, which is essentially what I think they're going to try, but we'll see. We'll actually see if this happens. So what is the SAVE Act? Well, it's Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. It requires individuals to provide proof of U.S. citizenship, such as a passport, birth certificate, or military ID, when registering to vote in federal elections. Now, keep in mind, this doesn't have anything to do with state elections. This is just federal elections. And this is basically shoring up, and like I've told you about, the National Motor Voter Bill, or that's what they call it, was the Motor Voter Bill of 1993, which doesn't allow or doesn't have the provision for, and by the way, that was passed by Democrats under Billy Boy Clinton, which doesn't have the provision for asking for and requiring citizenship proof before registering. And so that's going to be the case. But it also, by the way, the bill, this particular bill, also includes an additional $10 billion for FEMA to bolster the National Disaster Relief Fund. It also includes $47 million for extra security during Inauguration Day in January of 2025. Do you think maybe they have an idea of something going on here? I kind of wonder. If maybe they have an idea that there might be something going on. So anyway, the bill continues on and offers a whole bunch of temporary funding for numerous different federal agencies, all of it based on the previous fiscal year. And this means, of course, extending funding for items such as defense projects, agricultural initiatives without having to initiate any new programs, nor does it allow increases in production rates for projects that were not previously funded. So there's that. So that's the first item in the list, but we also have some other items, which has things to deal with spending like the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, which, if you recall, that comes up every 2 years, and that's funding the military every 2 years for the appropriations. We also have a series of bills outside of the funding bills and the spending bills. We also have some China bills that are up that are designed supposedly to curb the existential threat from the Chinese Communist Party. There's more than 30 of them that are under consideration, covering all kinds of different topics, such as protecting the U.S. farmland, trade secrets, critical infrastructure, and advanced technology. So these are all potentially on the docket here in September. We also have, as well, other bills. Now, some of those Chinese bills, by the way, are, just to kind of step back for a second. So some of these other bills are simply just ordering studies into an issue or whatever. Okay. But that being the case, yeah, we'll just have to see how these bills are actually gonna fill out. For an example, one of them could restrict outbound investment to China, ending the what's called the de minimis privilege, which exempts shipments from under $800 from tariffs on Chinese goods. That's getting left out entirely. I already mentioned the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, which is the annual blueprint there, but there's also the House version of that NDAA plans for $895.2 billion in spending, which is roughly $50 billion more than Joe Biden requested for 2025. The Senate's version of the bill comes in higher than that at about $920 billion. Then we have the Farm Bill, which is a renewal of a bill that essentially gets passed about every 5 years, and it funds land conservation projects, sets a national budget or national policy on agricultural related issues. It was up for renewal back in September of 2023, but it's basically just been sitting there since then. So, yeah. And then, of course, the forefront of that controversy is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or the SNAP program, which is the food stamp program. And it accounts for roughly around 76% of that Farm Bill's spending over the last 4 years. So again, social programs taking up a large part of our spending budget. The current House version of that bill would cut $30 billion from the SNAP program over the next 10 years. And critics, of course, are saying that undercuts food security among low-income Americans. Well, no kidding. It cuts food security for anybody in Bidenomics environment. Let's see, what else is there? There's the Veterans Affairs shortfall. So on July 19th of this year, the Department of Veterans Affairs surprised members of Congress by reporting that it was facing a $15 billion budget shortfall. In response, House Republicans on September 6th unveiled a bill to patch it up, at least some of them. Okay. The bill allocates $2.2 billion for pensions and compensation costs, nearly $600 million for payment readjustments. Most of the $15 billion deficit, which is around $12 billion, comes from the rising cost of medical expenses. And it's still unclear how Congress is going to deal with that. So, yeah. Anyway. So those are some of the things that are coming up for this coming session. In terms of all of this stuff. Well, speaking of costs, we have the cost of illegal immigration on the American people and the American government. And there was a study that was put together. That was a report released by House Republicans back in November, but I want to remind you of it, which it estimates that illegal immigration or illegal aliens cost us around $451 billion per year. And that's because of things like medical issues, food, housing, etc. 451 billion for them. Well, there was a enterprising young man on X who created a map to demonstrate that $451 billion being more than the GDP of, well, a good portion of the world. So let's take a look at that real quick. Everything in red has a GDP, or gross domestic product, value of less than 451 million. Let's take a look at that thing. We're talking all of Africa. Completely all of Africa. I'm not kidding. All of Africa have a GDP less than, or their economies are less than this 451 billion that we have. I also see, let's see, there's Portugal, which is less, Iceland, which is less. There's several in Eastern Europe, including one of the Scandinavian countries, or a couple of Scandinavian countries, it looks like, maybe. Several in the Mideast, and even some down in Southeast Asia that have economies less, as well as a good portion of South America coming up into Central America, places like Panama, Argentina, looks like Colombia, things like that. When are we going to stop spending all of this money? I mean, seriously, when are we going to stop spending all this money? This is ridiculous. We're spending money on people who aren't even supposed to be here. They're not supposed to be here at all. Okay, I'm getting hit up by a individual in my chat that has got an update on that Kentucky shooting. Apparently the individual was shooting cars from an overpass, shooting through windshields, and there are 7 injured out of the incident. None are deceased. The suspect is reportedly still at large, but they are looking for him. And it looks like he has a Facebook profile, maybe. So there we go. That's what we've got. But apparently the I-75 corridor in Kentucky is now open again, and they are looking for this individual. So there's your update. Okay, well, I was talking about the SAVE Act and that whole thing with doing federal elections and making sure that we have only citizens voting in our federal elections. It looks like there are some states that are going to have potential decisions on these as well in the election cycle. So this from the Federalist, and when you read this list, you won't be surprised, by the way, as to who's doing this. There's 8 states that are poised to decide on citizen-only voting amendments. So there is a individual, Avi McCullough. She came to be an American citizen via, obviously the legal method. And she is now the president for Americans for Citizen Voting. She spoke at a Washington, D.C. press conference this week and was talking about her stepfather proposing to her mother in the United States during a visit during the Christmas season. And her mother and her both came to the United States legally, would eventually go through the long, tedious, grueling process of becoming American citizens. However, she says that made her understand and appreciate her adopted country. All these years later, McCullough said she still cries with pride when she hears the national anthem. She says, "I understand the reason why so many people want to flock to this country. I absolutely respect it. But I also respect the legal system under which this country was founded. Citizen-only voting matters so much." Polling shows that, of course, a vast majority of Americans agree with this, and particularly in the wake of what we're seeing with the invasion by millions of illegal aliens under the borderless policies of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Therefore, Americans for Citizen Voting is working in states across the country to ensure only U.S. citizens are actually voting in U.S. elections. On Wednesday, the nonpartisan organization officially kicked off its campaign to secure citizen-only voting amendments on 8 state ballots this November. Now, the Federalist has obviously reported on this, and the COVA movement comes down to 2 separate words that make a big difference in preserving the exclusive rights of citizens to vote. Those 2 words are every versus only. The website for Americans for Citizen Voting says that you don't want to be in every state. You want to be in only state. Most state constitutions declare that every U.S. citizen aged 18 and older is eligible to vote. And according to Ballotpedia, 43 states do not specifically prohibit non-citizens from voting, although no state constitutions explicitly allow for foreign nationals to vote in elections. Non-citizens are allowed to vote in 17 cities in 3 states and in the District of Columbia. Maryland itself boasts 11 of those cities, with granting voting rights to foreign nationals, including also San Francisco and Oakland in California, as well as 3 cities in Vermont that are also doing the same. 3/4 of the cities that have allowed non-citizens to vote have allowed non-citizens in the country illegally to also vote. So here's the states that will have COVA questions on their November ballot: Idaho, Iowa, Kentucky, Missouri, North Carolina, Oklahoma, South Carolina, and Wisconsin will all have questions with regards to citizen-only voting. Now, some municipalities have taken the every qualifier to mean, well, it's not exclusionary, so anyone can. And so this is part of the reason why. They're part of the drive to make it to where it's no longer just every qualifier, but only, change it to only. Now, that was a quote by State Senator Julian Bradley, who is a Milwaukee area Republican, and some municipalities, she says, are going to, well, we are going to correct that in November. We're going to assure a little more integrity in our elections. So foreign nationals have been prohibited from voting in U.S. elections for federal offices since 1996. But, of course, that doesn't mean that that isn't happening. I mean, seriously, they already crossed the border illegally. What's going to stop them from voting? I've already shown you multiple times how illegals are voting in our elections, regardless of what the Democrats and the leftists say. But there is a high support for this. And Chip Roy told The Hill, if Democrats are unwilling to fund the government into March and their big hangup is the fact that they want non-citizens to vote, let them take that to the American people. They want to shut the government down over that? That should be on them. Yeah, and this is exactly what's going to happen. 71% of respondents to a 2018 survey from Hill.tv and HarrisX Polling Company found that they oppose, those 71% of respondents oppose non-citizens voting in U.S. elections. According to the poll, 91% of Republicans objected, and yet even more than half of Democrats actually did as well. So, a national poll conducted just last year by RMG Research found 73% of respondents were also opposed to it. People, I mean, let's be honest, people, we know for a fact that only citizens should be voting in U.S. elections. State and local government, okay, an argument could be made for that, but let's be honest, only American citizens should be voting in U.S. elections. And that's what should be happening. So anyway, we'll just have to kind of see where this goes, to be honest with you. But I think there's a lot of a push for it, and I think we're gonna get somewhere with it, potentially down the road. But we'll just kind of have to see. Now, one conversation that a lot of people have been having as we get ready to close out the evening has been regarding the idea of eliminating the Department of Education. Okay. And one of the things that that has been tossed about is the fact that the Department of Education is actually failing our young in terms of educating them. And one of the arguments that I have had on a regular basis has been that our education system is not educating our children in the proper areas, such as math, reading, science, technology, history, civics, things of that nature. Well, I saw this article and it gave me pause. Not surprise, just pause. This from Hot Air. Maryland Department of Education will stop redacting data on Baltimore's failing schools. Wait, what? They've been holding back? They've been not reporting things? Seriously? Holy smokes, folks. Holy smokes. So in February of last year, a local news station in Baltimore reported a shocking report about the state of the city's schools. And it said, quote, the Maryland Department of Education recently released the 2022 state test results known as the MCAP, which is called the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program. Baltimore City's math scores were the lowest in the state. Just 7% of 3rd through 8th graders actually tested proficient in math, which means 93% could not do math at grade level. Project Baltimore found that in 23 Baltimore City schools, there were 0 students who tested proficient in math. Not a single student passed. Now, I ask you, is there a reason why we should have a federal Department of Education when it is failing our people? When it is failing our children? Now, the Maryland State Department of Education reportedly took a different approach. Instead of trying to fix the schools, they settled for hiding the data. They hid the data. Really? Hey, you know what? We're failing in everything, so we're just gonna take that data out of it. We're not even gonna report it. Seriously? Oh my gosh. The state superintendent, Mohammed Chowdhury, I think that's how it's pronounced, claimed in a letter responding to a Fox 45 report that the state was required by, get this, federal guidelines to remove the data allegedly to protect student privacy. But actually, the federal guidelines don't even require anything of the sort. There are guidelines which states are free to interpret. Fox 45's reporter went to the state DOE to ask Superintendent Chowdhury what his decision will be. And, well, he locked himself in a room. He ran. He ran. So they ended up speaking to State Board of Education President Clarence Crawford, and he said that he supported the decision to hide the data. Wait, what? He was asked about it, and he basically said that, from what I understand, yes, if he approved it, and he goes, and the question was asked to him, you believe in giving less information to parents and taxpayers? And he goes, no, we believe in giving proper information. Proper information? Well, what would be improper in saying we failed to do our freaking jobs? Whoa. And you wonder why there's calls for destroying or eliminating, I should say, not destroying, but eliminating the Department of Education. So apparently, because of all of this, Superintendent Chowdhury eventually resigned, and the state now has a new superintendent who has agreed that redacting the data on failing schools makes no sense. So the new guy's name is Dr. Wright, and Project Baltimore asked if she would reverse the previous administration's decision and once again make the results available to the public. At the time, Wright said she would look into it. But then she said, I think it's just important for the public to know. And then at last week's board meeting, Wright announced her department would reverse course and unredact the results. So yeah. So apparently they now have somebody who is actually going to show this stuff. Telling you folks, push back, push back, push back. This is what needs to happen. We need more transparency. We need more more openness. You want these things to get, you want these schools to get federal funding, but yet they're failing our children. They're failing to even require grade level stuff. And you wonder why there's such a call for things such as school vouchers and those kinds of things. You just sit and wonder about that and question what either fix the schools or allow the parents to take their kids elsewhere and no longer use those schools. Pretty much where you're at. What a mess. All right, let's get and head on to tonight's question of the week. All right, and tonight's question of the week comes from the fantastic, the very wise Buddy Weiser. Here's what Buddy writes. Good afternoon, my friend. I hope my question finds you well and with a stout spirit. My question is this. What does the phrase Reagan Democrats mean? Who were they? And what region of the U.S. did they come from, or was it widespread? Also, did they contribute to the 1984 landslide victory? And he says, thank you, Buddy Weiser. All right. So here is the top of the question, because this has actually been something that has, it is, let's say, covered a little bit in the Reagan movie that I reviewed earlier. But here's the thing, okay? The phrase Reagan Democrat generally refers to someone who is typically a person who voted for the Democrat Party and, ironically, was oftentimes what they called an FDR Democrat, which is someone who voted for FDR, voted for his policies and things of that nature. However, just like what Reagan did, because Reagan wasn't always a Republican, he actually became a Republican after getting disillusioned by the Democrat Party, especially with regard to their economic policies. The whole idea, when you look at his speeches and things like that, he is very critical of the idea of the Great Society. And so because of that, those are the types of people that are basically Reagan Democrats. Essentially, what the terminology means is a conservative Democrat who doesn't necessarily agree with more progressive economic policies. Okay? Now, that being said, the Reagan Democrat has been profiled as being generally a white union, typically auto workers unions, working individual. And a lot of them, while they did show up somewhat in the South, at times, but a lot of them came from places such as Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, those kinds of places. So what is considered to be the Rust Belt, which is where we're kind of targeting, the swing states up in that Rust Belt. That being said, though, the contribution of the Reagan Democrats across the United States absolutely did get him voted in by a landslide in 1984. Okay. And ironically, that Wisconsin, Michigan, and a couple of other Rust Belt states that are up there haven't voted for a Republican since that time, 1988. So, yeah. So anyway, as far as, whether or not they affected anything, absolutely they did. I mean, they totally did. And you may see, and this is part of the reason why a lot of people are comparing 2024 to like 1980 as an example, because of the fact that a lot of the Reagan Democrats were disillusioned by the state of the economy and the way that the economy was headed under Carter in particular. And it's those types of Democrats who are typically conservative, generally Second Amendment, people who follow the Second Amendment and are in love with the Constitution, meaning not your typical progressive Democrat of today, okay, but more the conservative, moderate, middle-of-the-road Democrat, which, by the way, the Reagan Democrats also, even though they affected the vote in, 80 and 84, they also were instrumental in getting people like Bill Clinton elected. Because Bill Clinton came out and said, I'm not your normal average Democrat. And so what ended up happening is the Democrat, the quote Reagan Democrat, also moved over and voted for Bill Clinton and also as well Barack Obama. So again, the term Reagan Democrat usually classifies people who are disillusioned with progressive economic policy. They are typically white, hard-working, American conservative Democrat, what you would consider more of the older style Democrat who just isn't interested in the economic policies of the progressive left for the most part. Do I think that may come into play this year for 2024? Potentially. If Trump can demonstrate to these Reagan Democrats the fact that his economic policies are going to make them better, make their lives better, they will probably come out and vote for Trump. So we'll have to see. But again, keep in mind, that was mostly in the Rust Belt states, but there also were several down in the southern states or the Sun Belt states that also helped make it so that Reagan, especially in 84, was able to completely sweep, except for Minnesota in 1984. All right. Hopefully that answers your question for the evening. All right, folks, that ends it for me tonight. Do me a favor, if you haven't already and you don't already have an account on Rumble, please head on over to rumble.com, get yourself an account, search up the American Perspective channel, and make sure you hit that green follow button. Also, too, if you are already there and signed in, please hit the thumbs up both there and everywhere else across all of my outlets, because, of course, that helps the videos gain wider attention and wider audiences. We will see you Monday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on American Perspective. Have a great rest of your weekend, and good night, everybody.
The previous broadcast was produced and is owned by Active Eye Media LLC. All rights reserved.